Hello fellow egoists, welcome to today's news video where we'll be analysing chapter 258 of Blue Lock. As always, we'll be going first with a narrative analysis and then a predictions part, mostly because this chapter doesn't really have a lot to analyze in terms of field analysis. Most of it has been done in the past chapter reviews, so you can go and check it out. So now let's get straight into it. So first, we have of course the combined invent new weapon, which we'll talk about after that. But what I want to talk about is that superhuman mid-air direct shot. So the big reason why this is called a superhuman is that, as we saw, it takes insane body control, and most importantly, you need to be as proficient as possible with your direct shot, especially because something that I actually theorized that I was wrong about is that I thought in my chapter review that Isagi actually shot near the penalty area, so around the goal box, which is around this line as I'm highlighting, where he instead shot from the basically close to the edge of the penalty area. So why is it a superhuman shot? It's because Isagi was so good with his direct shot and the power he could generate in the air that he was able to shoot from here, right? But it's not superhuman in the actual shot itself. So what I mean by that is that, as I showed in my last chapter review, the shot is actually something pretty doable, and I'll probably even put a video on TikTok of a guy actually recreating something similar to the shot. What makes it actually superhuman is that Isagi was so good at direct shot that he was able to be accurate enough and generate enough power that he was able to do this shot. So it wasn't... people think that it's outside of Isagi's zone of his physicals, but when we look at it, Isagi has been a character who has constantly worked on his physicals ever since the beginning of the manga. We always see him. He was the one training the most in Team Z. He was the one who continued training, whether it be the night when he couldn't sleep or during after the first match against Team X. He was always working. And in the Nail, we've also seen a lot of different moments where his physicals were highlighted, even if they weren't as impactful, and that the Menshine match made a big point that Isagi was still lacking in physicals. But he wasn't lacking that much. As he says it himself, he didn't need that much in his mind for him to potentially beat the whole field in Menshine with only Kurona as his ally. And so we see a lot of moments where Isagi's physicality is actually more than we could have imagined. So when he gets past Shido and Rin and was still able to get an accurate enough direct shot in the top left corner, in the Menshine match when he blocked Chris Priest's shot, where we saw him do an acrobatic jump and generate enough power to be able to shoot the ball into the crossbar, and other things like those. So there are feats where we see Isagi's physicality being highlighted. It's simply that he was at a point where his physicality was basically exploding in an exponential manner. The more he trained, the better his options were gonna be. So this shot is superhuman because it relies on Isagi's biggest strength, which is his direct shot. Probably the only character I could see doing such a shot would be Kaiser, because he has the... how's it called? The Kaiser impact weapon, and actually it's something I forgot to talk about, but we see that the shot of Isagi is actually really similar in paneling to the shot of Kaiser, the first Kaiser impact we're seeing, where instead of Isagi's imagination not being able to catch up to Kaiser's Kaiser impact, this time it's actually Kaiser who's able to react to Isagi's direct shot, because Isagi's direct shot broke past the expectations of Kaiser, and so Kaiser will see him still smiling as Isagi is shooting, because Isagi's play was above, beyond whatever the whole field could imagine. But he still relied on Isagi's main strength of the direct shot, and this is why Isagi's goal is superhuman. Because it shows such a proficiency in direct shots that only Isagi has, right? Only Kaiser could have potentially made that shot, and that's because his Kaiser impact weapon is actually pretty similar in essence to the direct shot. But that's something I'll keep for another video anyway, I'll talk about it later. Second thing, I really didn't enjoy this interaction of Rin. Mostly why? Because it doesn't fit with what we know of Rin. Rin is a character who's, when he's mad, tends to bottle up emotions until he can finally explode it all in the field. So for example in the U20 match, when Sai talked with him, or when he talked to Isagi in the during when he was on the bench. So at times like these, Rin is a character who's rather calm, a calm demeanor even with his rage. So it didn't make a lot of sense for me when I saw Rin explode this way, but I would say this, it all depends on how do they show, will this have an impact immediately? So will Rin be able to awaken his original ego in the next goal, because he's already at this level of rage? Or is it just a throwaway thing where it kind of shits on the character that Rin has been set up to be? So it all depends on what happens next. I guess my big problem is that compared to what we've seen before, we haven't seen much growth per se in Rin's demeanor compared to the past. So it doesn't make that much sense for me to see him having such a radically different behavior compared to what we've seen before, right? But anyway, that's just a small nitpick of mine, but still an important one, because I feel like the characterization of Rin in this panel is kind of weird, right? It's basically just Kaiser 2.0. Then in this panel, I mostly want to talk about Shido. It was something I talked about a lot in my... how's it called? In my chapter review. I don't remember which chapter review, but yeah, the one in the chapter in which Isagi basically awakens Shido. Because we see Shido being frustrated and more frustrated as the match goes on. And this was something that was actually called out in second selection when he was fighting with Rin, is the fact that Shido's flaw is that he isn't frustrated enough when people shine more than him. And this is what stops him from what could stop him from becoming better, becoming the best. So the fact that, again, we don't see Shido's frustration, while it is... honestly, it deserves respect, right? That Shido is able to see the beauty in others even when he's being outshone. But Isagi, for example, is able to do it while being frustrated. For example, in the Ubers match, we see Isagi sort of giving the flowers for Barrow to Barrow the way that Barrow managed to devour the whole field, to swallow the whole field with his awakening, but was still frustrated enough. But for Shido, there's not that dimension of frustration which could get him to become better because of this. So just a small nitpick. I don't know if you'll... So because of that, I'm kind of scared for Shido's character, because it might limit Shido's character in that sense. But as with Rin, it's something we need to wait and see before being able to cast a good judgment upon it, right? The match is only starting anyway. Then we have Kunigami. So an important thing is that Kunigami says to Isagi that he's a reliant egotist, however you want to call it. But basically that Isagi relies way too much on others. But the whole thing is that this is the gimmick of the match. This match is all about high-level chemical reactions, where there's an absolute trust between both characters, but a trust in their own ego, and that this trust into their ego will, how could I say, cross with the other character, right? So here we see Kunigami sort of breaking off from the gimmick of this match. And this goes back into a theory I had a while ago. I'll probably post a screenshot because I talked about it on my Discord server. But basically that Kunigami, because of the way he went into the wild card, has given up on others. He's trying to only work by himself. And so the problem is that this philosophy is actually going against, quote-unquote, what this match is all about. And so we could get Kunigami trying to score by himself by rejecting the notion of this chemical reaction condition necessary to score a goal in this match. And so it's something I actually talked about like a while back in my what would be the Bastard Machine 11 video, where I said that Kunigami, if he could potentially be dropped in the midfield, I imagine that he would take Isagi's place, but instead he went into a defensive midfielder spot. And so since he's in a defensive midfielder spot, he's in perfect position to actually try to score with his lefty knuckleball, which we saw back in the first selection. And so we could see Kunigami trying to being in peak performance by himself, but because he's only by himself and not crossing this peak performance with someone else, will not score and he will fail, showing the same way that, for example, Bachira failed to score because he was trying to reject others and, how could I say, in his awakening thought that he would always be alone, was stopped by Isagi. we could see Shido, or I mean rather Kunigami, trying to score past Shido but failing because he's still in that notion of I am alone, and so it would be the manga's way of showing that this aspect of Kunigami is wrong per se through him failing to score. Then we have Hiyori. Something pretty fun that I saw on Twitter actually is that Hiyori's reaction in this chapter are actually pretty similar to Ness's. So I'll probably show the panel. So here, when he's talking basically the same way that Ness was talking about Kaiser's goal. But the difference is that we see how Isagi is ready to talk more with Hiyori compared to Kaiser, who was basically shitting on Ness, right? So then the talk about Kunigami, I mean, you can just read it, right? It's just standard Isagi and all that. But the big thing is this panel, this page rather. This page shows the core of Isagi. The fact that Isagi kept in his mind, in the back of his mind, an image of Nagi's shot and devoured it to make his own shot. Which I'll talk about in a bit. So yeah, you know what? Let's talk about it here. But it's definitely a new weapon that I could never thought up on my own. This right here is the core of Isagi and what makes Isagi the main character of Blue Lock. The thing is that Kaneshiro says it a lot in his interviews, which I recommend you read, but basically Isagi is supposed to represent the traditional, the quote-unquote average Japanese person. So a person who, how can I say, has a strong sense of community, a strong sense of talking with others, etc. And I mean, mostly because again, Japan also used to be a rural country. I mean, most countries were rural, right? But the countryside of Japan where everyone knows each other. I mean, I'm going on a tangent, but what I want to say basically is that Isagi is a character who relies on others, and the twist Kaneshiro, the author of Blue Lock, gives to this aspect of Isagi is that whereas in another manga this would have been shown as, oh, the power of friendship helped me, how could I say? Help me develop this new shot because Nagi showed me his peak performance or whatever. In here, it's mostly that you need others to be able to evolve yourself. This is Kaneshiro's twist, you could say, on the power of friendship and those sorts of values that you will see in other manga, compared to Nagi, who would be who's a character who thought of that shot by himself. So we see how Isagi is supposed to be the average person who needs others to evolve, that he gains things from others, a true world type in that sense, compared to Nagi, who is the epitome, the zenith of the self-type, whose imagination is all about himself, and he doesn't need others to think even of things like those, right? But anyway, I don't know if I've managed to talk about it properly, but it's something I would need to write down more. It's a good idea, but I don't know. You guys, I'll let you guys try to go deeper into that subject, and maybe I'll plan on doing a video about it sometime, but we'll see. Anyway, this page has the second important thing I wanted to talk about, where Isagi says, I improvised, and by trusting it would work, I think it just came out naturally. This is where Blue Lock's philosophy comes into play. As Isagi says in the Menshine match, I don't know the exact quote again, but he says something along the lines of, a protagonist feeling is a necessary piece for human peak performance. And this is shown right here. You need the trust in yourself, you need the ego, you need the will to actually do your things to be able to work at your peak performance, which goes against the philosophy of you need to work for others. It's only when you work for yourself and that you believe in yourself that you will be able to pull off your full potential. So this is this single line, by trusting it would work, this small line represents the whole thing about Blue Lock. It's only by trusting in your own abilities that you are able to then create the peak of your potential, to materialize yourself into reality and change your fate. And it also refers back to that one sentence in the second selection where Igojipachi basically says that miracles can be explained if you have the confidence in your abilities, the visualization. So all of this is basically just Igo's speech in the second selection being applied on a specific case. Then we have here the talk about Isagi's 2-gun volley, which it speaks for itself, but the important part is right here. If you make a mid-air feint and stagger your timing, you can dodge them and shoot, and even the goalie will have trouble telling when you'll shoot. And so for people who have seen my past video about Isagi gaining the Predator Eye, this is exactly what Isagi could develop with this new weapon. If he starts thinking about how to stagger his timing, look for the goalkeeper's weakness, he could develop the Predator Eye naturally with this weapon. Because the Predator Eye, the way that it's talked about in the Ubers match when Isagi talks about it, I'll show the page on screen, but he basically says that what made it so that Gagamaru couldn't react is that Barrow staggered his timing on his shot and watched Gagamaru to be... He watched Gagamaru staggered the timing of his shot to be able to make Gagamaru unable to react. And this is the whole thing with the Predator Eye. I've done a whole thread, which I'll link and show on the screen, on Twitter about this, which I'll put in the description and we'll do a video about, on what is the Predator Eye, and so you will see that this is a natural progression for Isagi to potentially develop the Predator Eye if he starts paying attention to what the goalkeeper is looking for. Anyway, that's just a small parenthesis. Then we see that Isagi merged the puzzle pieces, so in terms of aura, this is important because it tells us that Isagi's pieces can now be merged instead of used individually, and also that if Isagi's aura is all about puzzle pieces that can merge together, there might be an end to his aura. There might be a final puzzle in which Isagi will become the best in the world. So an image of where all of Isagi's individual pieces he will have gained all over his career will finally end and form a final puzzle in which he is the best in the world. But anyway, that's just a small detail. Then we have Corona coming in. Not much to say, except that here Grim actually looks kind of similar to the guy from FIFA. But that's just a small detail, right? And then not much. We have, of course, pretty standard, straightforward things about Isagi potentially scoring a hat-trick, which I already talked about some time ago. You can watch the video. And I theorized it before the first goal of the match, or I don't know. I mean, anyway, I'm just glad that it's being talked about because it does set the precedent for Isagi to potentially score a hat-trick. With Corona in, we could have a change in formation, but honestly, I don't really care for it. Blue Lock, I've accepted it, is not rigorous with its formations anyway. In the nail, at least in the nail. In the U20 match, it was great positional play, but in the nail, we all know, no matter where players are positioned, they will tend to go wherever they want, so honestly, who cares? I don't really care about trying to predict, I'll just wait and see. And then, yeah, the final page with Isagi's 2 guns, and of course the puzzle pieces showing the guns, which tells us that Isagi could potentially materialize other weapons or other things with his aura. And that's basically it, not much more to say with this chapter review. So next chapter is called something along the lines of Impossible Challenge, so it could be, I see two scenarios. Either it's about Isagi's hat-trick and what he thinks could happen, talking more about the way he wants to score a hat-trick, or it could be about Kaiser and Ness's reaction to being the two of them alone only, and Kaiser, how could he manage to overcome those impossible odds, right? Because we haven't seen Kaiser's reaction yet. Important thing, we haven't seen Kaiser's reaction yet, except for one panel, compared to, for example, the Ubers match, where we saw that there was one whole chapter about Hiyori coming on the field, and it's only the chapter after that we got Ness's and Kaiser's reaction. So we could get the same thing here, where we're not getting Kaiser's reaction, and it's kept for the next chapter, right? Since this was an Isagi-centric chapter. So yeah, not much more to say. Even if I did, I would basically just pass out and not be able to develop my thoughts further, or it would take a while. So I'll just stop the video here. I hope you enjoyed it. Go check out my Twitter, the Discord server of the channel, and stay tuned because the next video I'll be posting will be an Understanding Ego episode about Barrow and how he's not made to be a king. So Understanding Ego is just a series where we analyze the themes of blog. So go check out the past episodes if you want to see what this entails for Barrow, especially the one about Isagi, which is probably my best episode of Understanding Ego in my eyes. So yeah, with all that said, have a great one, fellow egoists.